Hi everyone, April 24th meeting. How's everybody doing? What's up? And are you blocked on anything and need help?
We're in the middle of user testing at the moment with people that are like non-GitLab employees with our prototype. I can give a quick demo of it. So- So yeah, this is currently what we have so far, which is a REST view that shows all the issues that maybe Iris are missing a deadline. And currently there are a few key parts. The first one is a top banner that gives you. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know, at least, maybe, I don't.
Typing weird. Yeah, essentially there's a top bar with all the like cards. So there's like different types of cards. There's no activity, overdue, block, and assignment, not on track. And the other part is that there's these banners at the bottom that explains why each of these issues are potentially at risk. And right now we color them based on severity, and I guess the logic is right now it's if anything was overdue or blocked, then we mark it as red. Anything other than that is blue. So for example, like an issue with no assignee or if there's no activities. And when you click on them, it filters by the specific condition. So in this case, it's the overdue condition. And then we also have a display all issues checkbox. This came from last week's user testing with GitLab employees because when they're looking at Iris issues, they do want to also see other issues in relation to these. So that'll help with them in terms of like assigning people or just seeing what other issues are going on in a workflow. And also another thing is right now we're adding ways for them to configure specific conditions. So an example over here is no activity. So this is basically if no activity for 7 days within a specific stage. Then they can also edit these as well. So yeah, that's the demo. And then in terms of the tasks, we have two different tasks. The first one is identify Iris issues. And then the second one is configure no activities. So basically this part over here. So yeah, we have two more testings left, and then I think once we're done with those, we'll synthesize what we have. And then we'll have to create our final presentation for the class. So, but yeah, does anybody have anything else to add?
This is pretty cool. You all are really, you've made a lot of progress on this. I think it's advanced a lot. So you mentioned one kind of feedback that you got when you were doing some testing where people said, hey, I want to be able to see all of the issues in context when I'm looking at the ones that have these special statuses. What other kinds of like feedback have you gotten that you've iterated on in testing on this? Because I think it's going to be important for you to be able to call out both in your final presentation to your professor and like in like portfolio or whatever, like we got this feedback and then we thought about what the problem was and then we came up with this change to the design to address it.
Yeah, so I can share my screen a little bit. This is like an earlier version that we had yesterday. So I think some of the feedback we
Yesterday,
got is
ooh,
that,
moving fast, love it.
yeah, like this is really overwhelming to look at. A lot of colors and sometimes people like while labels are useful, people might not want to see all of them all the time. So that's why we had that feature where you can potentially, I know this is probably like beyond the scope of this project, but like maybe in an ideal world, you can choose what labels you want to display under the risk view. So you can choose, I only want to see none of the labels in this view, or I only want to see priority labels or other types of labels. And the other feedback we iterated on is the at-risk, okay, this is like the new one actually, at-risk condition. Like this is an older interface that was a little bit more like clunky. And then there used to be like an and all or situation going like kind of like this. And people have trouble navigating that. So we just like kind of put them all together in this like kind of like all configuration first, and things like Ramona like pointed out that, oh, maybe we should have like a banner configuration. So we have that. And then you can also point into more like specific ones here.
Yeah, I like this little widget that you created for the condition input. I also really like that if you click on that gear.
Yeah, we another thing that would change is that in one of our earlier iterations, we didn't have like these gear icons here.
Yeah.
People were like, oh, I don't know if I could trust this because it's like, where do you get this information from? So we wanted to make sure that, oh yeah, like there is a gear icon here, like you can change these, and if you have a question, like you can maybe hover over it, it will pop up that tells you like what this is all about.
Yeah.
And
So if you click on one of those gear icons in the latest one, yeah, this. I really like that you did this because I can like this, I don't know, you can say like rhymes or whatever with some of the other stuff we've got for a board. And I think it was smart of you to echo that. Like this looks a lot like the board configuration thing. So I like that you're echoing the design language and layout that is already being used in the board for this. It makes it fit in really naturally. You're not asking the user to kind of like learn a different layout pattern there. That's good.
yeah, and then the other like layout change is that instead of using a banner, I changed it to like this UI yesterday because I was thinking maybe like it's not common for cars like filters to live on a banner, and maybe like this would kind of reduce the amount of color there is on the screen.
Yep. I think that makes a lot of sense because also that light blue color, the blue 50 background is usually used for a call out or an info style alert, and it's not semantically what this is. Really, really when in this newest version, when I see this, to me, this feels like this is an extension of the filters bar. And what is the little collapse button in the bottom right do? Do you have a state for when that's been clicked?
Oh, sorry. There's like a baby in this place. Can you please repeat that?
Oh, sure. The little collapse button in the bottom right of the at-risk view. What happens when you click on that?
Yeah, that we haven't decided because we don't know if this is like the right direction yet, but technically it's gonna be similar to this. So it's
So
just like
do you have any specific question in the testing you're doing around that?
no, I don't think we have anything. It's more like if the person discover it, like
Yeah.
do you have any suggestions for that?
I think it's a great opportunity because they may discover it and they may try to click on it. If they do, you can ask like, what would you expect to have happen if you do that? What would you expect it to look like after you do that? To get a little bit of direction from them on kind of like what expectation has been set for how that would go for them.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Yeah, like curious if you have any like feedback on these like designs.
I have two minor things. One is, oops, yeah, I held up two fingers. But also you did a great job. So sure, why not? Balloons. Now it's not gonna do it. There we go. Okay, so I have two in the European way, so it doesn't do balloons. Minor suggestions. One is, well, there's not really a suggestion because I don't know what to do about it, but the due date, as we have it on cards currently, is styled the way that you have it when it's overdue, right? The due date shows up in red and the little calendar icon is red. You also already have a red overdue by X with a different color of red for the text on that card in this view. I think those two pieces of information, they're not necessarily exactly duplicative because one says what the actual due date was and one says in like a relative time frame how long ago the due date was. But you might want to think about how to handle those two separate pieces of information that are kind of saying the same thing. And they're also both calling attention to themselves there, whereas in this like at-risk view, I don't know that you necessarily need both of them to be there calling attention to themselves. So think about that, how you handle due date specifically on overdue cards. The other suggestion is that the risk view toggle that you have in the header could probably go into the board configuration dropdown, like the first button after the search. Because that's where we've got like show, don't show labels. That's where we've got like show, don't show epic swim lanes. This is like another kind of like change of like view options for the board. So this can probably go in there. And by the way, I noticed that it seemed, well, my interpretation of what I saw, maybe I'm wrong, but this could be data for you. I noticed that there was a little info popover. That was like at risk view, blah, blah, blah. And it had like a call to action button at the bottom. It was like see at risk view or something. That. My assumption seeing this is that that's something that would pop up on page load as like a call out. Is that your intention, or how does this work?
Yeah, yeah, it will probably come up on first page load, but I think once they've done sort of, I don't know if it's possible, but like once they've done any interactions with it, then it won't show up at any of it.
Yes, we have a mechanism specifically for this. I actually just used it for something on boards. Yeah, we have a thing for this where basically you can register a feature in our Ruby backend, and then you can basically have a call out that will only show unless the user has dismissed it, and once the user dismisses it, it just never shows for them again.
Yeah,
think
and we
we'll
also try, I think like that feedback is really valid. And it's something that we're like also thinking about as a team is that where to put the risk view toggle, because we did try an iteration where we put it underneath the filter bar alongside like labels view. But like when we tested on like someone, like it took them a long time to find like where the risk view is. And he was like looking at the labels on this main page. So yeah, wondering,
Sure.
yeah, what should we do about that?
Yeah, discoverability could be a concern, right? For things that are in that menu. Well, you don't have a ton of time, but I think it would be interesting to get some feedback from Nick Brandt about this specifically. He's the designer who is like the DRI for boards, and he was the one who put together the design that has the like the view options menu. Because I think there's a strong argument to be made that this is a view configuration. You know, this is like an option for the way that you slice and dice the stuff that's on the board. Same as like show or don't show labels. Same as like do or don't show your epic swim lanes. But it's also like a little bit different. So yeah, I don't know. There are interesting things about it one way or the other. Something that could also be considered is like if there is a persistent state. So like, you don't have a design right now in this current version for what happens if someone clicks that collapse button, right? If there is a consistent like, shallow ribbon state for this, then maybe you don't need the thing in the filter header because it's always there. And this is like you expand or collapse this thing on its own. But yeah, I think I really like, and it's something you should call out somewhere in some fashion, that you did originally maybe have this in that menu, and then you found that there were discoverability issues and you iterated on that. I think that's great. That's good work.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I just had a question about more on discoverability during testing. I'm curious, like, what, I guess, how should we respond if we're trying to show, in this case, the risk view, but they're not able to find it? If it's like inside the icon button, that's one of the options. Like, should we, just bring
Yeah.
it to find it, or
You know, I think there's a fine balance between like learning from the way the user fails and just like accidentally kind of wasting your time and their time. I think if you give them the task like if you give them a task that's like, how can you see, what issues are at risk here? And they poke around for a while and they don't really find anything. I think there's a certain point it doesn't take very long to be like, okay, we were not able to successfully help them find this with the current design. So then you can basically, admit defeat on the design and say, okay, so if you click on this thing, do you see any options there that could help you? Like you can give them that little hint because otherwise, like, you know at that point, okay, the design as it is failed to help them discover this. But if they happen to open this menu, is it discoverable within the menu at least? So maybe there's like a little bit of like a consolation prize there. But more importantly, then that unlocks you to follow the rest of your testing, right? That gets past, okay, this test case failed, but let's move on. I need them to click on this thing so that we can test out the rest of the UI. So it's not giving it away or like cheating or anything at that point because it's clear that that part didn't work, but you need them to click on the thing that gets the rest of the testing.
I think I have a question about just based on like user interviews so far. Some people say that they don't really check some of the cards, and some people say they do. So I guess this needs like further exploration whether we should keep these options or change some of these options or even have like a, I guess, customizable option for the card display.
Mhm.
But just
Yeah,
wondering like what, yeah.
like adding your own was the first thing that came to mind when I saw that these are customizable. Because like, why not, right? Why can't I just make my own custom at-risk edition? Um, but then things start getting much more complex, right? That's more of like a mature stage, not MVP kind of thing. Something to think about, which I don't necessarily know if it has any implications on what the user actually sees and interacts with, but something to think about is what's the scope of these things. So if I change what no activity means as a at-risk filter, is that just for me, or is that for anyone who sees the board? That's what that means now. And also, is that across all boards, or is that just for this specific board? Thinking about like the level at which that preference is saved. Again, I don't know if it's something that you necessarily need to have anything that's actually visible in the design or interactive in the design, but it's a question you should be able to answer, I think, about the way that this works as a functionality. Is like, oh, this is like just for the user, or this is specific to the board, or you're actually changing this for like all boards. I would recommend not that one. Is something you should think about.
Yeah.
That's a good
Also, might
question.
want to.
Oh.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we were just saying that I think Alice and I were trying to ask the person we interviewed the other day this question, and then he said that he would like it only for himself because if tech lead might want a different set of conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't know how this is, like how generalizable this is.
Well, so this is also something interesting, which is that if you close the little side panel, so the stuff that is in the cog menu, that's for anyone who ever sees the board. That's changing the board itself, right? That's like this board is based on issues that meet these criteria. The stuff that's in that little preferences slider menu, that's just for you. And we remember it for your user when you come to this board. So it's for you for this board. So going back to, is this something that is part of that like view options menu or not? If this is a view option, then all of the other ones already are a thing that is just for your specific user and specific to your user looking at this specific board. So there are some all of which is to say, there are a couple of different examples for how this works at different levels right now. There are board configurations, which is the way the board works for everybody. And there are the view options, which is just your user for just this board. So that's something to think about. Another thing you might want to consider is, and this is like, again, this is scope creep. So acknowledge, or I want to acknowledge that like I am challenging you to widen something and you don't have to do it, but just think about it. As in like give it thought, don't necessarily incorporate it into your design, you know. But when an issue is blocked, it may not necessarily be in like a danger red state. Because you're planning work, right? You're planning work, and part of planning work is identifying dependencies between things. So you're going to naturally have issues that are blocked by something that's in progress or that's planned. And it's okay that it's blocked because you're not doing it. It's not due right now. You know what I mean? Like I have to finish issue A before I work on issue B because issue B is dependent on stuff that's going to be done in issue A or whatever. So if issue B is blocked, it might not be an emergency. You know what I mean? It might be kind of like you've got kind of two different levels here. Basically, you've got like the blue, hey, just so you know, this is in this way, and the red, like, uh-oh, got to do something about this. Blocked might sometimes be, uh-oh, like this is due today and it's still blocked by something. But it might also just be, hey, just so you know, this can't be worked on yet. It might, blocked might almost be like this not only doesn't need attention, this like can't have attention yet. So again, I don't know if there's anything you need to change about your design, but just something to think about the nature of a blocked issue is that like, it might not be, oh no, this issue has hit a wall. It might be like, this issue is marked as being dependent on something else.
I see. Yeah, I didn't think about that. Do you think this should still show up in the risk view, but as like a blue, like informational thing?
I don't know. I think it depends on what users need. I'm not sure if you have any questions specifically about blocked issues, or if you have anything that you say in your script that will prompt the user to talk more about blocked issues, but I would see if there is feedback in the testing there. I just want to call out that like blocked is not always a big uh-oh. Like overdue, strictly speaking, does mean, hey, this needs attention, right? Like even if it's no big deal, the attention is, oh, I need to take that due date off, or oh, I need to close that. That's actually not a big deal anymore, right? It needs some kind of cleanup because it is overdue. Blocked might just, you might know it. You probably are if you're the PM, you're probably the one who added that blocker. So it might add noise, maybe, but not necessarily always. So it's something to look for feedback about.
Yeah, thank you for the heads up. That's good to know.
What is the calculation that goes into not on track?
Yeah, for that, we're thinking about simply just like only
Oh, health
about how
status.
to label. Yeah, so it's like combining needs attention. And
Oh, I see. Sure. That's basically not green.
yeah,
As
not
it's already
green.
configured. I got it. I got it. That makes sense.
Yeah, Marcin, we're also curious, like, if you have any like feedback on this thing regarding like technical writing.
Which thing? Or the entire thing, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing, a small thing is risk view label. I would do with sentence case. So it would be lowercase v. Like I said, small thing. I can also add link to where we have this documented for us. Do you know where it says at the top, these issues might need your attention? Do you know what would show up under the question mark at the top?
Excited. What is the
Mhm.
pattern that you like for GitLab if there is like a question mark like this?
We have one currently. Let's see. The only place that I know for sure that we do that is in the sidebar on issues. Some of the widgets in the sidebar have that. I think that the time tracking one does, and then also for epics, I think that the inherited start and end dates use that pattern as well.
So I have the link with the guidance in pajamas. And so on that page, I don't know how important it is, for your project to follow all our all these, guidelines, but nevertheless, check it out. On that page, there's also guidance for what to put in the link text, which here you don't really have.
Oh, something that just made me think about too is an accessibility concern. So for these cards in the things might need your attention view, it looks like each card is maybe a clickable element, but then inside of the card there's another clickable element. That is an accessibility concern. A button basically should never contain another button, and a link should never contain a button, and a button should never contain a link. Like any interactable element shouldn't have other interactable elements as a child of it. So you might want to think about how that works. I think the visual presentation may still be achievable, but you would just have to think about which parts are actually interactable for what behaviors. And actually, more broadly on the accessibility thing too, I would encourage you to think about tab order. If I'm a user who is using a keyboard to navigate, what is the order in which my focus moves around? And how do I know that something is focused? Is a really important part of accessibility in design is the part where the designer thinks about like, hey, this is the way that these things should be ordered in the DOM semantically, and this is the focus state for different things. I think you're not necessarily these cards are a little bit of a new pattern, but I would encourage you to have designs for what it looks like when each thing that can be focused is focused. If it's a new thing, like you don't have to show a focus state for like the display all issues checkmark. That's a known thing. But like I would be interested if I move focus to the cog icon button in this total card, what does it look like? And what does it look like if the total card has been selected as well? Like thinking through that sort of thing is really important, because if you don't give specific specifications, if you don't give clear and careful specifications, I should say, in the design, then you're going to end up either getting questions back from engineering when they build something, or you'll get like a best effort from them which may not match what your expectations were.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's a really good point about accessibility. We definitely didn't think that much about that, so it's good that you pointed out. I'm curious, like in that case, like should we even have the gear icon inside the card then, or should it, I guess, like in the banner, it would just be one single gear icon that brings up like the entire side panel?
I will leave that to you. I think timelines are what they are, and this is a pedagogical project at the end of the day. So I think it's good for you all to think about it and to be able to speak to it in your final presentation and or in any portfolio materials. Whether or not this has like big effects on the actual design that you deliver is a separate question, but it's important, and it will be important in your career later, to think about accessibility in the designs that you put together. So something to think about, something to have as a bullet point or a slide. I do wonder how you would do it for the way that you have those cards designed now, though. Oh, also on, I guess this is kind of the intersection of accessibility and tech writing. That little collapse button in the bottom right should have a title. So just think about what the title is on that button, because you're going to need it to announce to a screen reader user. And it also is nice for a user who uses a mouse and can see their screen to have like a tooltip that says what's going to happen when they click on the thing.
Do you mean like a label next to the collapse button or like a tooltip next to it?
A tooltip, just something on hover or focus that tells you what it does. That like has whatever the text would be if this were a text button instead of an icon button.
Because without the title, it would say, a reader would say whatever the icon is. So you would tap into it and it would say like chevron up.
Yeah. Yeah, which for a screen reader user would not. Oh man, that's something that I don't know. I don't know if this is something that Linda has you do. But you should sometime use VoiceOver to try to use the internet. It's a really great empathy building technique for designers and engineers. Because a lot of websites don't do accessibility well, and it is extremely frustrating to use like text to voice technology to try to browse the internet without being able to see. So it helps you understand why it's so important to think about focus management and tab order and like having proper ARIA labels if things don't naturally have the right text or labels.
Yeah, that's actually a great idea.
Yeah, a little bit of
That's,
side homework for you, not relevant to this project, strictly speaking, but I would encourage you to do it. It's a good exercise, and it'll look good on you later to know how to do that and have done it and be able to speak to it.
yeah, I think like my doctor did it because she has like visual impairments, and then it's like definitely takes longer to pick up the phone and like very different experience for sure.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of computers you use. By far the most common like accessibility software is actually a Windows program called JAWS. That's a real beast. It's got a sharp learning curve, I think, if you're someone who is used to using visual and tactile interactions for per computer. Um, JAWS is like more strict or something, I guess you could say, than the VoiceOver program on a Mac. VoiceOver is like kind of easier to use, but it's just less common. So if you have access to a Windows computer and you can get like a educational license or whatever for JAWS, that's the one to try out because it's much more common. VoiceOver is like more forgiving and kind of will make your website seem like it's better than it is.
I have a question about, I guess the integration of the search bar and then also our dashboard. Because I think some interviewees said that they would like to see the search bar reflecting the information displayed in the
Right, and you
dashboard.
had that in an older version of this. I didn't notice that you took it out.
Yeah, because I think um Aria and I had a talk about this because apparently like people have different opinions on this. I think we were thinking that if we reflect everything in the search bar, then in a way the dashboard is kind of like the functionality of the dashboard itself is reducing because then you can just use the search bar to do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What else did we talk about? I think there's another thing is regarding, wait, I think that's all right.
Well, there's a couple of interesting things there. First of all, it's very interesting to me that you got conflicting feedback from different users about it. There's something to, oops, yeah, I actually did a thumbs up. There's something to dig into there, I think. If nothing else, this is like, you know, in like a lab report, in the like discussion part, this is an interesting paragraph in the discussion part, is like, we got mixed feedback about this. What does that mean? I don't know. In terms of like the duplication of the functionality, yeah, some of it, but not all of the functionality that you have would be duplicated by that. Like the configuration that can be done on these views is not something that I think could be encapsulated in that filter bar. So there is something there. The people who did want to see it in the filter bar, do you remember what the reasoning was?
Yeah. So the reason they said is that then they know what this dashboard is based from. Because if there's no like, I guess, labels filter, then they're like, okay, where did the system pull these information from? But then with, I guess, the search bar reflecting the filter, then they're like,
Yeah.
okay, now I understand where this is from.
I'm not sure that that person would be satisfied by that though, because presumably what we would have in the filter bar would just be like, you know, risk type colon, whichever one of these things you clicked on.
Mhm.
Right? It's not going to give them more information necessarily. There's also something here philosophically related to the view options, because those view options do not show up in the filter bar. Because the view options are show or don't show labels and show or don't show epic swim lanes. Although, as soon as I say that, I realize that something that is different between this and the existing view options is the view options are not changing what cards are visible. The view options are changing information that is displayed and a little bit about the way that they're organized for the epic swim lane. So I guess there is also an argument that this is not necessarily something that would fit into that view options menu, right? Because the view options is not affecting the cards that are present. Yours is a filter, right? It is changing which cards are present, and it is also changing what information shows, but together with that filter. So yeah, it is kind of a hybrid. Yeah, there is something to think about. I don't know what the right way to go for any of that is. But it's an interesting thing to think about, like, you know, at the level of like typology or something. Because it kind of is a filter, but it is kind of also changing the information that shows on them. And especially with that display all issues, you're basically saying don't filter, but do show this new information. So when you have display all issues checked, but you've clicked on one of these, then it is kind of a view option because you're just changing what information shows on the cards, but you're not changing which cards show. Yeah, there's a little bit of a rabbit hole you can go down on that.
I guess like if you were like designing this feature, like how would you think through like what category should this belong to?
What category should it belong to?
Yeah, for example, it's like, oh, should it be a view or should
Oh,
it be
I
a
see, I
filter?
see.
Should it be both?
Well, you know, there are different ways to approach this. If you wanted to, I don't know that this is the right way to go. If you really wanted to, these could be separate things. These could be something in the view options that's like show at-risk hints on cards or whatever. And that makes the little thing on the bottom of the card show up and doesn't do anything with filtering. And then separately, you could have a filter for boards. The filter type is like risk type. And then it would do the same sort of thing that we have for other things. Like it'd be like risk type equals, and then you've got a drop down of your different options here, right? Risk type is like unassigned. What's interesting too is that if it were a filter like that, you could combine them. You could have risk type is no activity and risk type is unassigned or something. I mean, obviously unassigned shouldn't have any activity, but you know what I mean? Like in that case, you could kind of combine them instead of having like a single drill down. But that does take away some of the, I don't know, like there's something really nice and almost like it's a curated kind of concierge experience that you've put together here for like, so you want to see what's at risk, huh? Here's some options. Why don't you drill down into these? you know, having these summary cards almost kind of gives me like a couple of different to-do lists to drill down if I want to get to like, you know, inbox 0 on my at risk, right? Like, okay, let me think about the no activity ones. Are any of these a problem? No. Let me move on to the next one. Overdue. Okay, what do I want to do with these 4 overdue issues? Like this one I can actually close, it doesn't matter. This one I'm going to change the due date. This one I'm going to like poke the developer and be like, hey, we really need this. Can you prioritize finishing this today? So I think that breaking them up into like a view option that just toggles showing this and not showing this, and then some filters maybe does take away some of the value that you're adding here by giving this very focused, like, here are some lists to burn down, go through these lists, and that will like help you get what's going on track. But it's like another option. Like mechanically, it could work. There are trade-offs. I guess in theory, you could have that in addition to this like widget experience. I don't know. It's something to think about. I think the pain point that user you mentioned has around not seeing it in the filter bar sounds like they're like, I don't know if I can trust like what the basis for the information I'm seeing is. I feel like that's maybe addressed by the configuration that you have, because if I don't know what no activity means, I can click on that little cog and you show me exactly what it means. You show me like when nothing has happened in this amount of time, then, you know, whatever. So I would pay attention to, let's put it this way. I would pay attention to what users are saying about, oh, I wish this showed up in the filter bar, and really digging a little bit into like why and why they need that. Because if this is a persistent user level setting that we remember, then if I refresh the page, I'm not going to lose it, right? If I refresh the page, then we remember and keep the board in the same state. So if the person is worried about like, oh, like, I don't want to lose this, I want some way of saving this. So if it's like a filter, then I know what filter I can apply again to get to it, then maybe we don't necessarily, you know, maybe that's a fear that they have that is not a big deal if we're going to like remember and persist it. But I would pay attention to reasons that they might want that kind of thing. Oh, and on that note too, think about what effect, if any, things that users are doing here have on the URL. Like, are we adding parameters to the URL when these interactions happen? If so, what are they? Why are they necessary? How do they help us mechanically? It's something that not every designer thinks about when putting this kind of thing together, but I think it really is helpful in the discussion with the engineers and can make things a lot clearer to them about your intention about the mechanics of it.
Oh, that's a really good point. I never thought about it. Yeah, because I know that in GitLab people always like copy and paste the URL just to share with people.
Right.
Like, people.
And if changing this applies a URL parameter, then that's a mechanic that the user may notice and may be able to manipulate directly by the URL, but also it means that if I copy and paste this URL, then I'll see the same thing. However, if these settings are specific to the user, I can't copy and paste the URL and send it to someone else and have them see the same thing. They would see like their own version of the at-risk overdue view, which may have a different configuration. Maybe it's the default configuration. So something to think about there. It may be the case that we shove all of this stuff in your condition into the URL as parameters. I don't know. This is also the kind of thing that when you start actually breaking down the work and talking with your PM and engineering lead, this conversation comes up, and the engineering lead probably has a good take on how to make that sort of thing work well. You don't have to think of everything. You should think about your stance on it. You should think about what your take is, but be open to the fact that there are people who are more expert in that stuff who can kind of take the conversation from there. You can kind of do like the first step, right? Like, well, I think we could probably do this in the URL parameter, and then, you know, the engineering manager might say, oh, actually, like, we've got this pattern we use for that kind of thing. And you go, oh, great, like, good. But it starts the conversation at least. And it's good for you to have a default stance. And also starting that conversation will help you learn for the next time you do that kind of design that sort of pattern exists. So it helps you kind of learn some of the mechanical aspects of the features that you're working on as well, which helps you work better with the engineers who you're working with. Obviously, unfortunately, as part of this project, you're not going to get any of that part, but.
Yeah, that's good to know. And I guess the next question is like, do you guys have any feedback on the condition settings here, like either visually or on a copy or on like the mechanics or the logic behind it?
Yeah, a couple of things. So I don't think I understand what show means. And then on the actual condition and title editing widgets, I like the look of it, and I think it makes sense to me what it is and what levers I can pull to make things happen. I don't think that those are the icons that we use, which is like a very minor thing. And then the drop downs, I think, are probably a bit different from the ones that we use, which again is super minor. This is like fine level of detail, high fidelity, final stage handoff kind of feedback. That's not where you're at. You're testing out a solution. The trash can icon button, I don't know what patterns we have in GitLab today for I can add 0 or 1 or multiple things and I can delete any of them in the list. So I don't know what the norms are for what we have for the way that you delete an item that you have added to a multi-item list.
So we used to show on issue boards, we used to show an icon with a trash can on each card. Now it's behind the cogwheel menu. So
yeah.
So were you also saying that because currently the trash can icon is aligned with condition and not
Well, so there's
the
two different
rectangle,
things.
so it's
Yeah.
not clear. Yeah.
I don't know what happens if I click on add condition, but I assume the condition is a header for this list, right? So the trash can does feel like I'm deleting everything in the list or deleting the list itself, but I think the trash can means I'm deleting this gray
Yeah,
box.
the specific one. And then if you have like two conditions, it might look something like, yeah, kind of like this. So maybe if you have like two conditions, there's like an and or thing, and then you can just like pick which one to delete, like this one.
Oh, and or interesting. Oh. Huh. So when I add a second condition, is the title of the first one changing from condition to condition 1?
Yes.
You might not want to change header names. That's also an accessibility concern. I think that if you want to have a title for those conditions, I don't know that you really have to have a title for the individual conditions, right? Because they're not something that's going to be referenced externally, and the order in which they appear is the order in which they appear. I think going back to your most recent design, I would expect conditions to be the name for this could be many list. And then each individual item in the list has its own ability to delete it. I would also caution you that the and or functionality is cool and is something to not take out of your design, but something to be aware does add engineering complexity. So that's the sort of thing where, like, if you're like getting to the nitty gritty and breaking this down with like a PM and an engineering manager, the engineering manager may say, oh, can we leave that out of the first version and like add that to like a V2 or V3 kind of thing.
Yeah, that's true. Might have to ask for like, oh, what are the most, like the widest cases that this could apply to for the MVP. Some people actually mentioned that they want to use this to like filter for specific labels or like specific workflow stages. Like for example, somebody who's on the QA team might want to filter for only like workflow QA and just see
Mhm.
what are overdue and what are unassigned.
You know, I think something that you're accidentally designing here is like a quick filters GUI for boards, which is not terrible. You know, like your focus is solving a very specific problem, but like I could also imagine there just being like one of these cards that's like, you know, assigned to Aria, and I can just click on that instead of like changing like assigning equals in the filter bar if I want to. You're basically almost giving the ability to have like bookmarked or saved searches, which I think is something that the team that owns boards is also separately working on, kind of with a different goal in mind. But there's like kind of an interesting intersection there as well. Also, I think we're technically over time. I think this was 11:50.
Yeah, we're approaching time.
Yeah.
So can we talk about the presentation date? So I think I skipped like two of these meetings, so I don't remember what you were saying, but I remember you liked the date of May 7th for presentation to GitLab. And Gina said she would look into moving one of the two big meetings that we have that are both scheduled for the week after and the week before that, which is the UX call and the product division call, whatever it's called. They're kind of big meetings also in terms of like scheduling. So my suggestion would be to pick a time that fits you and us, and hopefully some of the plan PMs. Then, if you don't mind, also we would announce it in our Slack and just like invite whoever from the company that wants to show up, and ask you questions at the end. So May 7th, the same time as this meeting happens, would this work for you? That's a Tuesday. Everybody nodding slightly. I don't know. I need an enthusiastic yes to be
Yeah, I
sure.
think at first Gina said it might be at 10 a.m. on May 7th, but we can definitely
Oh.
11.
Okay.
Like the same time as our meeting right now.
Okay.
I think either of those work for me. I realized last week I'm out of office your entire like last week of this project, but I'm gonna still join the calls because it's like missing graduation. So
You're gonna call in?
yeah, my wife and my mother-in-law and I actually have like some Mother's Day massages later that day, but should be okay. It's gonna be 12:15 Eastern time when we do that. So 10 o'clock actually works better for me, I guess, in that case.
Okay. All right. So I'll schedule the event. Are you okay with us sharing it with the rest of the company?
And for context for what that means, I
Mhm.
think that is helpful for you because I don't know if they will join or not, but this seems like the sort of thing that our head of product and our head of UX may want to join. So you might be able to get feedback directly from them, which is like a nice thing for you. Because like that's a person in a position of authority to get some nice feedback from. And like it's a nice thing later in your like presentation, or well, I guess this is your presentation, but it's a nice thing later in like your portfolio or whatever. You'd be like, yeah, actually, like the head of UX at GitLab recommended this or gave us praise about that. Like that's nice. No guarantee that they will come, but if we let them know,
No. And I just
they
looked
may
at
make time to
their
attend.
calendars. They're both busy then,
Both
but
busy? Damn.
maybe they'll send a minion.
Yeah.
All right. I'll do that then. All right, so thank you for today. Do you know what you're working on for the upcoming week?
Yeah, mostly just synthesizing and then creating the final presentations. We also have some in-class deliverables that we have to submit. But yeah, I think that's
All right.
that's all we have.
All right, so someone will talk to you next week. I'm also out next week on the 1st.
Next week on the 1st, I'm around.
Okay.
So at least
So
I will
Chad-
see
Chad
them.
will
Maybe
talk to you.
we'll be back. I don't know.
All right.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.